Welcome, everybody, to ISA Presents with Pilar Alessandra from onthepage.tv. My name is Max Tim. I'm a coach and consultant, much like Pilar is, and we're going to have a little kind of coach chat, if you will, today, talking about writing on the page specifically, specific script writing stuff. We're not really going to get into industry, analytics or commentary or anything. We want to be focusing on what we can do for you as a writer, quite literally. So Pilar and I have known each other for a while. Well, I don't remember the last time I saw you, but we always kind of stay in touch. But I'm happy and excited that you're on. So thank you for doing this.
Thank you for having me back. Coach talk. It's like we're in a locker room.
Right? Yeah. No locker room talk, but
no. Okay, coach.
Yeah. No locker room. But you have a podcast, and so is it weird to be interviewed instead of you being the one doing the interview?
No, it's a relief. Actually, you're doing all the hard work. So
I agree. I haven't been interviewed in a long time. So anybody watching this, if you want to interview me, hello, I'm here. I love doing this though, so I don't mind at all. But why don't you give a little bit of a background, just to, quickly? It doesn't have to be a full bio, but in terms of your experience and how long you've been doing this and what you focus on.
Well, first of all, Max, you're officially invited on the On the Page podcast. How about that?
I would love to do that.
Okay, we've only got, I think, less than 60 to go because I'm going to be stopping it at episode 1000.
1000.
Yes, which is about a year away because 1,000 is a good number and it exhausts me to think about it.
It is.
Yeah. So On the Page is my podcast, and I've been lucky to have it all this time. onthepage.tv is sort of my catch-all for everything. And I've been teaching and coaching for years privately, but recently I was just hired as faculty at the University of North Carolina School of the Arts in the MFA program. So I'm really happy to be teaching there, and I've relocated to Winston-Salem, and I'm loving it.
Yeah, I'm so glad you're loving it, even though Los Angeles misses you. I was like, oh my God, Pilar's not in Los Angeles anymore. But,
I'm right here on screen like everybody is.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. Is it strange being on the other side of the country and totally different climate, or actually it's probably relatively similar down there?
It's relatively similar. Yeah. I was actually in LA last week. I was finishing up teaching for the NBC launch fellowship. I've been doing that for a couple of years, that and CBS. And so I was just there last week. I said hello to LA, and then I came back here where it's very humid.
The whole eastern half of the country right now is just getting pummeled with a heat wave. It's rough in Wisconsin. I usually live in Wisconsin. I'm in LA right now. But anyway, let's just dive in. I have a whole bunch of questions for you, and I hope that these are that all the readers or writers watching this are paying attention because they're important. But I wanted to start with something positive.
Okay.
And I know that you've been reading and working on scripts for so long. So what are some common attributes in talented writers, successful writers, both in the form of craft, but also like the form of just who they are as professionals that you've noticed?
Okay, so I would say when it comes to craft, you always hear that like they have a real voice, and people are like, what does that mean? And what it means for me is there's a personality of the page. There's a handling of genre. There's an attention to the page that almost like they're treating every single word as special. Like I really love when I hear that voice come through. That always gets my attention. I think it gets everybody else's attention. We can work on story. It's really hard to nail voice. That's something that comes with experience.
Yeah.
For career, I would say that the common attribute of my successful clients is that they're chill. They roll with it. Let's say they don't agree with the note. They take the note, they nod, they go and make what works work for them and throws out the things that doesn't. They're chill. They're just easy people to work with and talk to.
Yeah.
Even if their voice is very edgy, they tend to be very chill people.
Yeah, there's a level of confidence in the chill, and again, like you said, it comes from experience. It just comes from the amount of scripts that you've written and just the amount of back and forth you've had in terms of the experience with people in the industry. And so I think for like new writers, not even yet emerging, but people who are just starting to try to jump in and they're on their first script or something, I think it's important to hear that it's there is time.
Mhm.
Let's just
Yeah.
get the craft down first, and I have some discussion about that we'll hit on in a second. But okay, so kind of along somewhat of the same lines, but this is going to be squeezing you a little bit. But if you had 1 minute on the phone with an aspiring writer, somebody who's new, what would you tell them?
I would tell them to find a story that, this is going to sound so new agey.
I'd love it. Please do it.
Find a story that is actually true to them. Because I think the biggest mistake is when people get derivative. And a lot of times new writers sort of hit me with, it's about a hardened detective and a Navy SEAL that have to find a missing girl, and it's like, oof, that sounds impactful. How can we tie it to something you actually know and experienced? And when they do, when they tell me something about, oh, their boring old life, driving a truck, I'm like,
Yeah.
Let's talk about the weirdest or worst or craziest thing that could happen with driving a truck. And suddenly we've got like this special movie. So that's usually the first thing that I talk about is what's cool and specific to you.
Yeah. I tell my writers, think of it from the like an attitude or belief system of, I want to write a story about ... And it's not about a hardened detective and a Navy SEAL. It's about my experience as a single, child in, the suburbs of Chicago in the 1960s or something. I want to write a story about that, but then set it in a horror movie or set it as, or romantic comedy, or suddenly now it's you connected to something that is derivative. Every story is derivative in some way. But you need to, it's not when you then connect yourself to it. Like if you put a hardened detective and a Navy SEAL on a boring truck drive across the country, that's kind of interesting.
That is kind of interesting. And then if you're the truck driver who wrote that, the specifics of the obstacles that they'd hit, how this would be a challenge to them that even a hardened detective and a Navy SEAL might not know instinctively. Right. Yeah, I like that movie. Awesome.
Yeah. Don't give them any weapons. They have to only use their brain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Anyway, we're not trying to brainstorm a story here. Okay, cool. I love that. Okay, so this is something that I want to talk about, and it's a trend that I've noticed with a lot of writers, not all of my writers, but a lot of writers within the ISA membership, but also my coaching clients, where it seems, and I don't want to get too harsh here, and you can tell me whether or not I'm speaking truth, but writers are that much more, especially over the past couple of years, I've noticed, eager and maybe a little desperate to just gain access to, agents, reps, managers, producers, sell their script. Mm-hmm. And so do you think there's a little bit of a cart before the horse mentality going on, or am I being too cynical? I don't know. I feel bad.
Yeah. I mean, I understand, of course, the drive, right? What's the point of writing something that is just going to sit there? But at the same time, like you said, that desperation, people feel it. And if you change that desire to sell to that desire to connect, that desire to make a friend, that desire to get a question asked, that desire to give a compliment, right? Or to support, right? Wow, I really love this thing that you wrote. I specifically love this one scene there. Can I talk to you about that? Okay.
Yeah.
Now you're gaining access, but you're also making a friend and you're getting information, and you're supporting. So I feel like, you can do all those things as long as it's not, only about what can you give me.
Yes. Yeah. I wrote a Substack article the other day, like the real reason we create, and it's about actually giving what you have to offer. And, coming from the new age, woo-woo law of attraction kind of idea of you can only receive what you give. And so if you have this change in thought process of, wait a minute, I have a talent here, I have a great story, I want to write it from a perspective of I'm giving this to people, as opposed to I'm writing it so that I receive a chunk of money, or I get this famous career, or I get to work with Tom Hanks, or, you kind of lose the actual focus of what artists are trying to do. And so the idea of giving is so important. But I guess to kind of go a little bit further, and I don't know, maybe it's a little different on your side, but do you find writers are looking for access too early in their career.
Yeah, I think you definitely hit on that, because you really need the content. You need the script.
Yeah.
Because what if somebody says, great, show it to me, and you're not ready? You just had an idea, or you just wanted a connection.
Or first draft only. I mean,
Right. And that can blow the connection.
right.
So yeah, I think, but it doesn't mean that you can't be honest with those people too. Like, maybe you're supporting or making a friend or asking a question, and they say, oh, I want your script. And you can be like, well, you know what? I'm still working on it. I would love to show it to you when it's ready. Thank you. This has helped get me going toward that end.
Right. Yeah.
You know?
You just be honest.
Yeah.
You're not trying to trick anybody.
And, if there's one thing that all this social media and all that stuff, it sounds backwards, but I honestly think it does make people more honest and more, because you can't really BS very much anymore. So people know all about you. So I think that if you're just truthful and say, I don't know about that, or I'm learning about that, or yes, I want that, but I'm not ready yet, people are forgiving. They appreciate, authenticity, right? Like, that became a buzzword, and for a good reason.
For sure. So there are levels of access. All the writers watching. I mean, there is that level of I know that this script is ready. I've had all this different feedback, these multiple rewrites. It's done well in contests, or I did well in fellowship. I know that I can now go out with it, so-called, or at least find a rep, or at least attempt that process. Versus access, meaning I'm just trying to grow my network. I'm just trying to meet people and have people in my purview. And so I think it's so important to be considering those things, because, like, do you think there's like a magic number of how many scripts a writer should have finished before they start going out?
I don't. I know I'm supposed to say more than one, right? Here's the deal. It's like, if you're going for representation, of course you need more than one, because your representative needs to know that they have things they can shop around. That makes sense. But I also see some really brilliant writers holding back a first script because they don't think they're ready. And I've seen first scripts win the Nickel Fellowship, So I know that sometimes the talent is there, and if it's a great script, put it out in the world, but start working on something else in the meantime.
Yeah. I've used that I don't know if an analogy is the right word, but that idea that like, if you really break down what it takes and how much time it takes to start the process of submitting, and then somebody actually wants it, and then the option happens, and you have however many months of the option, and they're trying to put a package together, and in the meantime you're doing some rewrites, maybe and then suddenly it's set up, like, you get far enough to it's funded, and now you're going into production. Once that happens, you're pretty much out of the picture. If it's a movie, if it's a show, you might be staffed as a staff writer or whatever it might be, but you have so much time between actually reaching out and then seeing a finished product. What are you going to do in the meantime?
Right, exactly. Especially when people are going to say, oh, I really like this. I can't make it right now, but I would like to see your next project, or do you have a horror movie? Oh, I actually do,
Right.
So yes, it's always in your interest to keep writing. But I do think that sometimes that one script, if you feel confident in it, can go to the production company that you're aiming at. You have to be realistic.
Yeah. Oh God. And realistic is, I'm a Capricorn. I'm very practical and probably far too grounded. And people get a little angry with me in terms of how I am sometimes too realistic. But there's a level that you need, like, there's a reality to the industry because it's a business. But at the same time, there's a ton of optimism and reason for hope. I mean, original movies are coming back. Indie film is making a comeback. But we do need to stay grounded in the reality. I mean, I remember this was probably, 20 years ago, maybe a little less. And I was working at Writers Boot Camp. I don't know if you remember Writers Boot Camp. It was a school for screenwriters in Santa Monica. And I went out with some people that worked at Writers Boot Camp. One of them was a friend of a coworker. He was a relatively big producer. He had made a few big movies. And there was a young woman, I mean, like, fresh into town, 21, 22 years old. And she was very eager to talk to him. And she asked something along the lines of, how do I become a professional screenwriter or something? And I'm trying to listen, like I wasn't really paying attention. I just went like, oh God, what is this guy going to say to this brand new fresh face in town? And he said, well, you're not a writer until you've written 10 screenplays. I was like, that's the worst thing you could sell somebody. Because it's not true, but I kind of understand what he's saying. You need to get your feet under you. You have to kind of, come into your own and understand your process and voice and all that stuff. But 10 screenplays could be 15 years,
Yeah. I mean, I think, you hear this a lot of teachers of art, like, first of all, don't do it.
Right.
I don't really understand like what's behind that. You're teaching, you're coaching, you're supporting, let's get some of this wonderful talent and these great stories out there. That doesn't really serve any purpose.
It doesn't. It does not help. And I talked to her afterwards. I was like, it's a grain of salt what that guy just said. Okay, so what kind of mentality should writers have when considering and submitting to contests and fellowships? So you teach for a particular fellowship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Expectations, how much work it takes, all that stuff.
So I've been coaching for NBC and CBS and Rogers OBS, and I have always been struck by the people who end up in this fellowship, their energy and enthusiasm, and that told me that, okay, they were recognized for their talent, and probably in their meetings, they also had an energy and an enthusiasm, a willingness to be there long hours, to be watching all the things they're supposed to watch, to be reviewing all the material. I mean, they work hard, so I think that that's something people should be thinking about if they're going for actual fellowships. Okay, these are long programs and they want to be able to staff you. So they need energy and enthusiasm. Yeah. For competitions, I think you're just playing a numbers game. Honestly, I think that there are some competitions that have, certain prestige, and you're throwing your script in there to try and get eyeballs on there. So you're trying to do really well so that an agent or a manager can recognize it and ask to read it, and maybe you get some representation, or maybe a production company. But if you don't do well, you have to know that you're up against thousands of people. You might have gotten a reader who didn't get what you were going for, and it really is not about you or the work.
Yeah.
I really feel like some people they don't make a certain contest and then they just bury their head in the sand for 5 years. And it's like, don't do that. It's just, you're just playing the numbers. That's how I feel about competitions, at least. I don't know how you feel about them.
I agree. Now, it is a little bit of like playing the lottery, but there are chances to raise your level of possibility with the more work you put into the script, and then choosing the right contest based on genre and doing your research, which ones actually will help me in terms of, notoriety and acclaim. At the same time, I tell my writers sometimes, like, if they have the money to spend, because it can get really expensive to submit to contests, but if you have an early draft, you're like 2, maybe 3 drafts in, and you're like, I think I just kind of want to get some feedback, pay a little extra for basic notes. The contest can be great for that because it's very inexpensive to get notes, even though they're not incredibly, detailed or anything. But it's a way to gauge, how am I doing? How's the script? If I'm getting to the semifinals on a second draft or third draft, okay, and that's not so bad. But if I'm not even making it to the quarterfinals on like 3 or 4 different contests for small contests, then there's some feedback there, and it's a relatively inexpensive way to do that.
I think though you have to gauge the feedback. Because let's say that you look at that feedback and they're giving you notes like it's a different kind of movie. Don't chase those notes. I've watched people chase coverage in competitions when somebody was reading too fast or not understanding the real intentions of it because, or didn't like the genre. And again, I've just watched like my writers go off the rails. So I would definitely do it with a grain of salt. If they seem to understand your intention, what you're going for, and there's a note in there that speaks to you, then by all means, take it.
For sure. Completely agree, because the contest notes, depending on the contest, are sometimes a little, less than, but not all the time.
Because they're reading really, really quickly.
Yeah.
They're not getting paid a lot, and they have to go through a lot of material.
Yeah.
I get it.
Right.
Yeah.
Totally get it. At the same time, I tell writers, whether you're hiring me or anybody else or working with a writers group or something, when you're finished with a draft that is ready to be read and to receive notes, and you're actually open to receiving notes, some writers may not be ready for that. Always give it to at least 3 different people, so that then you can look at the patterns among those 3 sets of notes, then choose, okay, obviously all 3 people are mentioning this or talking about that. I always tell them, like, when I'm giving you notes, like I have a small 4-call package where they could technically do 4 different script full evaluations. But I tell them, don't just immediately start addressing my notes. Take a second, maybe get somebody else who's a friend or something where you don't have to pay a ton of money, and see what they say. Maybe they match what I'm saying. And otherwise you're going to be rewriting constantly. You just like one set of notes, rewrite, one set of notes. And it's just, oh God.
Right. Trusted readers. And it could be that reader is just really good in a certain genre. Like, oh, I have to give this to my friend who is the biggest horror movie fan. Because they'll tell you those places where they knew what was coming, or where they had seen it before. You know what I mean?
Totally.
Like that could be a trusted reader just because of their expertise as a movie watcher.
Totally. Like they knew who the killer was after page 12. Like, oh shit, that's not going to work. Okay. So how about some common mistakes? What common mistakes do you see when you're reading screenplays? Like on the page, not necessarily choices from a career standpoint.
Yeah. So again, that sort of leading with the derivative thing, where I feel like somebody's really been influenced by certain movies they grew up with, and now they're writing exactly like a movie that they grew up with. Like an example I use in classes a lot is people who are writing high school movies, like it's a John Hughes movie. Okay, well, they may have grown up with that, but high school's changed.
Mm-hmm.
Things have changed, and that whole like, oh, we're so clicky. Even the clicks have changed, So it's that idea that you may be writing well, but you might be writing something that is of another time.
Mm-hmm.
So it's another thing too, is to like, let's say that you grew up in the 80s or 90s. Well, these days, I think it's absolutely fine. Write your high school movie about your experience in the 80s or 90s.
Right.
I don't think that's taboo anymore.
No.
I think people are really interested in that. And that will make it more authentic, There's that word again.
This is true. So it's a little bit of like conceptual choices you're talking about in terms of the common mistakes.
Yes, I really feel like a lot of writers, the quality of writing has gotten better and better and better over the years.
Mm-hmm.
There's so much information out there. There's so much access to scripts. People get it. So it's not that they are bad writers. It's that they're not trying to do anything original. So that lack of originality, that to me is the big problem when there's a problem.
Yeah, I think it's so smart to say it that way, because I've noticed a lot of writers kind of accept an idea a little too easily, and they move past the conceptual development stage and go right to character and structure and page work when we haven't really quite worked the concept. Like, is this really as unique as it can be? Mm-hmm. How many different elements can we throw in here? What am I trying to say? What's the theme? All of that really needs to be figured out before you get into outline. I mean, what are you outlining if the concept hasn't been tested? So I think that's so smart. And I hope many more writers hear us talk about that, because you're going to spend a minimum of 6 months of your life working on that project. Mm-hmm. Is it worth your time? And it doesn't mean you're a bad writer if you don't get it right. It just maybe means the concept hasn't been developed enough. So yeah, that's good. There are a lot more common mistakes that I notice, but concept is a big one. And as a part of a little rapid fire way to end our interview here, I'm going to go into some of I'm very curious of your opinion of some of and not just common mistakes, but some of the questions. I want to hear about some of your success stories. What's come out of On the Page recently, and about your podcast.
If anybody puts, Amazon movies on or whatever, check out Bob Trevino Likes It. starring John Leguizamo and Barbie Ferreira. It won the jury prize at South by Southwest last year and has just killed it at every festival it's been at. Bob Trevino likes it. It was written by writer-director Tracy Lehman. And
I love Tracy. I worked with Tracy.
Okay, great. So Tracy's been a student and client of mine for years and years and years. This was done story to script, from idea through finished draft. And I sort of have a process of doing that. And so we got to develop it along the way. And at the very, very end of it, when it was done, I was like, Tracy, this is it. And it has been it. I really love it. But it will make you cry. So
congratulations. That's exciting.
Yeah, I'm really, really excited for her. And then Gigi Hawkins, another client. This one we didn't story to script. I just got to sort of do one pass at it, which I don't do anymore, but she's so talented. I said yes. She just did an independent movie that also it didn't get a prize at South by Southwest, but it was there, and she just got distribution. And it's called I Love My Husband, and it's indie. It was set in, she had access to one location for a certain amount of time, and she wrote a script to use it, and that was it.
Love that.
And so I'm very proud of her there too. So that will be coming out. Michael Leon Woolley has a movie with Heartbeat Productions, which is, that I'm not sure when it's coming out, but it's called Witch Please. And it's like ghost hunters who are back in Salem, but it's very, very funny. And I've been really proud of his trajectory as well. So
I love that.
Those are three clients off the
Witch Please. So that's right up my alley with Scott, our producer for our show here. Scott and I are all about this paranormal, supernatural, ghost investigation stuff. And we have a podcast called The Fantastic Story Society, where we bring people on that are experts in like very strange areas, like snake experts or an expert on Wyatt Earp and stuff. But then we talk about ghosts a lot. So is it out now, or is it?
It's still in development, but
got it.
It is with Heartbeat Entertainment, which is Kevin Hart's company.
Yeah.
And it will be out in the future, but I'm very happy that he got that deal. Yeah.
That's exciting. So you are on episode, you're coming up to episode number what on your podcast?
So right now, I think we're at 941, I think. I know, it's crazy. And then, on thepage.tv is where you can sort of find all my stuff. I also have a book, which I forget to promote all the time. My publisher's like, you're the worst. It's called the Coffee Break Screenwriter. And it was, look for the white cover version of it. And it's all about, getting writing done when you only have 10 minutes in your day to do it.
That's a great idea. Well, congratulations. That's exciting. Very exciting. And hopefully I can be on your podcast in the near future.
Absolutely. You've been invited.
Okay. Good. Thank you. All right. Let's end with some rapid fire questions. So that could be too many.
I'm gonna screw this one up. I just know it. I'm just gonna be like,
quick question, and it's really more of like, what do you think of ... and then I'll fill, and then you can just give a quick little answer. Don't worry if it's too long. It's fine.
Okay. All right.
We're not gonna have a clock.
Okay.
What do you think of parentheticals?
I think they are used best when it is. It's like the clock is on, and I'm like, I think it's best when you have to convey meaning of a line of dialogue that wouldn't naturally be read. So if something needs to be read in an angry way that would naturally be read as ecstatic, that's when you would put angry. Otherwise, why do it? People understand the meaning of it. Actors understand the meaning of it. Don't over parenthetical.
Agree. What do you think of transitions? Cut to, fade to, dissolve to, etc.?
I think, we no longer do it between every scene, right? So they can be, for sort of dramatic reasons, they can be effective sometimes. If you've been in a sequence of scenes for a long time, but you are cutting to a whole other sequence, right? Cutting to now you're in China, right? It makes the reader's eye recommit, and you realize this is sort of a new section of story. So I think it can be used dramatically very well.
Agreed. I always think of the Family Guy is the perfect example of cut to. Like Peter sets up a joke, and they literally cut to seeing a ridiculous version of what Peter just said. And so in my head, I always think like that's when we want to use a cut to, not just for a joke, but there's a continuation or there's a connection to what we just saw, and then there's a reason to go cut to, and then, oh, I see what we're actually doing, or it's the opposite of something that's happening. There's a purpose behind it, for sure. Yeah. I don't know if I want to say, what do you think of scene headings? And it's a lame way of saying it, but is there a format to it? Should it be bolded? Should they be underlined? Just what do you think about all that stuff?
I could give an S. You know what I mean? I think the time people spend on bolding and underlining, who cares?
Yeah.
A scene header is, are you inside or outside?
Right.
Where are you? What time of day is it? What's the light? Okay, great, done. And then go into the scene direction, and you can describe, what does it look and feel like?
Right.
Yeah, I wish people would get out of the scene header debate. It's,
I really don't even look at them. I mean, my eyes, okay, that's right. And then I'm focusing on the scene heading or a direction, and I'm hoping that the scene direction gives me more than just, a lot of times I see a date in the scene heading, and then I miss it. And then I'm reading, oh, wait, I have to go back. So the date actually gets lost sometimes in a scene heading, unless it's 24 and we're going, 12:01 a.m. and then 12:10, then there's a purpose to putting a time in there. But yeah, okay. What do you think of page count for series and features?
I'm a big break the rules, do whatever you want person. But I do usually say, hey, look, these days things are coming in around like 110 is the minimum, the maximum. Sorry.
Yeah.
Maximum. And that doesn't mean that you have to shortchange your script, because it could be something that, is very long and very slow in the way that it's directed. And if you write it with that slowness and intention, it doesn't mean that you're making it a 90-minute movie. But there's a certain thing to be said for not stuffing your movie with scene after scene after scene where you're just repeating yourself. The reader is smart, the audience is smart. We can get there now. We don't have to babysit the reader or the audience.
Right.
So I would say like between 90 and 110. I don't know. You're just going to get mad at me. But yeah.
No, I agree. I mean, if I see a script that's 113 pages, I'm not like, oh,
Yeah.
But if I see 121, 22, I am a little tired.
Yeah. The days of the 120-page script are over.
Yeah.
Now, of course, everybody sees those scripts that, this script is 160 pages, right? And it's often like some auteur that, is now up for an Academy Award. And yes, they've earned it. But also, wouldn't you want your script to be a nice, economical, involving read? And you don't want anything to get in the way of that. And sometimes people do go to the page count first, and, they're thinking, if it's this amount, it better be worth it. So there's already a little bit of a bias. So I want people to read your script without bias.
Totally. Yeah. You want them to just go, cool, let's open and read, as opposed to, oh God. What do you think of emerging writers? They've yet to, get something produced. They're still trying to make a name for themselves, thinking about the sequel to a feature that they're writing.
Oh, that kills me. I'm always like, what? Stop it. There can't be a sequel till we've had a successful movie. And once there is a successful movie, now you've got like an engine behind it as far as like what people want in the sequel. So the people with the money might go, you know what? We want a sequel around this character.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I'm the first person to roll their eyes when somebody goes, yes, but in the second movie, and it's like, don't cheat.
Right. They're ending the script on like this major cliffhanger. I'm like, what? Wait a minute.
Yeah. Yeah. Don't cheat your first movie. Get your first movie made, put the story in there that deserves to be told.
Yeah. See, now I got a whole bunch more popping up, but this could be a longer lesson. So we'll try to keep this short because I'm sure you talk about this a lot. What do you think of loglines and the proper way of considering them? Not necessarily just writing them, but what's the purpose behind them?
Well, actually, I'm glad you asked me what the purpose is. So I want to focus on that for a second. That there are really two different kinds of log lines, and it screws people up all the time, right? So there's the log line that is just yours as a writing tool. Mm-hmm. And that's when somebody like you and me will be like, what actually happens? It's about a person who has to do this thing, but this gets in the way, right? And that helps the writer as a writing tool to be sort of the cornerstone of their movie, so they understand we can build out from there. That's one purpose of a log line. But then there's also the log line as a selling tool, as a pitching tool that might not be married to the structure, that might just be, here's this cool high concept, go, totally. And that's just a first act setup, but it's just such a great high concept. That's the log line. Yeah. So it really depends on who you're log lining for, yourself or as a pitching tool. And if it's a pitching tool, get that original hook in there. That's all anybody cares about.
Totally. We're of the same exact mind. I call them a developmental logline or a presentational logline. The developmental one is just for us. It's this long, ridiculous run-on sentence where you're just throwing all the elements in to see it in one, hopefully small paragraph. And the other one is like what you would actually use to pitch and get it out. I think it's an interesting note that you make, though, in terms of, if it's a high concept, yes, you can present just the first act setup. A lot of people don't have a really big high concept, and that's okay. Like low concept Lady Bird movies are great,
Right.
But then you need to be aware that I need to reference the second act a little bit. I need to know what they're going to do,
Right, because that might be where the hook lies.
Right.
It's familiar setup, but what somebody does about it is new, right? Or what their goal is emotionally is exciting. We want to know if they'll get there. So there's always some little high concept spark even in the most sort of character driven indie movies. There's something unique that makes people go, oh, I've never seen that before. Or I wonder how they're going to accomplish that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think every movie has a hook. Some are just Liar, Liar, The Purge, Hangover. Right. And others aren't. And that's okay. But there's still a hook. There's still like a recurring moment that's occurring within the middle of your movie. And that's what people are going to be focusing on. Even Lady Bird was just rebel. Right. Let's find ways to rebel. And that's you could probably do it a little bit better than that. But all right, I think that's good for the rapid fire. Well done.
So much pressure. Not rapid from me. I'm so sorry.
No, it was great. I mean, a lot of those topics you could have a full hour-long class just teaching log lines, and I wanted to ask you, what do you think of structure? It's just it's too broad. But for everybody watching, if you have any questions of any kind, comment, because this is going to immediately go onto YouTube on the ISS channel. And comment there, ask us whatever you like, and I'll follow through. Maybe we'll kind of keep a running list and we can send them to you, Pilar, or something.
Okay. But, all right. Be kind.
Yeah. Well, definitely tune in to onthepage.tv. And if you'd like to work with Pilar, you can go to onthepage.tv and find some options there. Are you still working with Lee in like the community that you were doing?
Oh yeah, gosh, I'm so bad at promoting stuff. Yes, thanks for asking. So there's the screenwriter support group that she does where she answers career questions and gives sort of a lesson on career every 2 weeks. And every 2 weeks, I do the craft part. So you go to leejessup.com and look for the screenwriter support group, and I'm there.
Nice. What platform do you use?
For me, like when I'm teaching and hers, Zoom.
Yeah. Oh, it's just on. I see. Okay.
I know, nothing fancy like this StreamYard thing you got me on.
I know. I signed up for circle.so. You should look at it.
Okay.
It's a great way for all of your writers, anybody who's, signed up to work with you, it's like their own Facebook page, but without the algorithm ads and everything. And they can comment and post and share their material. And so I do that for my Story Farm community, but I think all the coaches should be doing it. You could sell stuff there. That's where we were talking ahead of time, everybody, that I created an AI agent where I trained it only on my material and teaching and education, and my writers have been using it and use it just to help brainstorm. So
what happens when it clones your body and goes out and pretends to be you? What are you going to do then?
I have a feeling that's already happened. The amount of time I go out and people are like, you look really familiar. I'm like, yeah, I think there are like 12 other versions of me already.
Interesting. Okay. All right. To be continued in the sequel.
Right, in the sequel. Yeah, I'll tell my agent that the sequel is coming before the regular first movie. Anything else you want to share, Pilar? Any words of wisdom, advice, or no?
You know what? Keep on trucking. You know, you're doing the right thing. If you're writing, you know, that's because you should be writing, and don't let anybody tell you that you shouldn't.
Agreed. All right. Well, thank you, Pilar. It was great to see you, and I know I'm going to see you again or hear from you again. So we'll just stay in touch and figure it out.
Thank you for having me on. This was really fun.
Cool. Thank you, everybody, for watching. We'll see you soon.